How does a city-state smaller than Central Park control one of the largest financial empires in the world? The Vatican isn't just the heart of Catholicism. It's one of the most quietly powerful economic forces on the planet. And almost no one knows what it really owns. Officially, Vatican City spans just over 100 acres, but its influence and its assets stretch across continents, hidden behind layers of tradition, secrecy, and centuries of compounding wealth. So how did this tiny sovereign enclave become one of the richest entities on Earth? And more importantly, what exactly is still under its control? Let's start with what we know. The Vatican operates like a nation-state. It has its own central bank, diplomatic relationships, passports, postal system, even its own army, the Swiss Guard. But where things get really interesting is the money. In 2023, the Vatican publicly reported assets of around $6 billion. But independent researchers estimate that number is dramatically lower than the real figure, because the Vatican doesn't just own bank accounts. It owns land, buildings, art, gold, and something even more valuable, untouchable legacy power. Take real estate. The Vatican owns over 5,000 properties globally. In Italy alone, it holds more than 1,000 prime buildings, many in the heart of Rome. But that's just the surface. Reports suggest the Church owns additional properties across Europe, the Americas, and even in places like the UK and Switzerland, held through shell companies, religious orders, and obscure trusts. How much are these properties worth? Some analysts place the estimate north of $20 billion, and yet most of these assets are never listed on public balance sheets. Why? That's where the questions begin. Because technically, much of this property is held by various branches of the Church, not Vatican City directly. But the lines are blurry. Who controls what? Who benefits? And who's actually accountable? Then there's the Vatican Bank, formerly known as the Institute for the Works of Religion. It was created in 1942 and has operated largely outside traditional financial oversight ever since. For decades, it's been accused of everything from money laundering to funding covert operations. Multiple popes have launched internal reforms, but despite audits and crackdowns, the bank remains one of the least transparent financial institutions in the world. So here's the question. Why does a religious institution need a sovereign bank with diplomatic immunity? Is it about protecting church operations? Or is there a deeper strategic reason? Let's go deeper. Beyond real estate and banking, the Vatican controls one of the most valuable collections of art and artifacts on the planet. The Vatican museums house thousands of pieces, from Renaissance masterpieces to ancient manuscripts. The Sistine Chapel alone is priceless. But experts have tried to estimate the collection's worth, and some suggest it could exceed $50 billion. And yet none of it is for sale. None of it is taxed. And almost none of it appears on any official balance sheet. Its value held in permanence. What happens when an institution can accumulate wealth for centuries, never pay taxes, and never sell its assets? You get compounding power unlike anything else in modern history. Now here's something most people don't know. The Vatican receives income not just from donations, but from investments. It owns stakes in companies, blue chip stocks. It even once held shares in a pharmaceutical company that made birth control, an ironic twist considering the Church's public stance on the issue. The investment portfolio is managed through a department called APSA, the Administration of Patrimony of the Apostolic See. Think of it as the Vatican's internal hedge fund. And like the bank, its full holdings are largely unknown. Why is there so little transparency? And how much capital is really being managed behind the scenes? Here's where the psychological tension spikes. For most people, the idea of a religious institution wielding this level of financial influence feels confusing. Isn't the Church supposed to be about faith, humility, and service? How does that square with global real estate empires, off-market assets, and sovereign banking? To be clear, none of this is illegal. The Vatican is a sovereign entity. It has every right to operate as it does. But we have to ask, what happens when an institution is immune to outside audits, tax law, and public disclosure? And what role does secrecy play in the preservation of its power? Here's another layer. During World War II, the Vatican maintained a policy of neutrality. But questions still remain about what it knew and what it did with regard to gold transfers and post-war capital flows. Some historians allege that Nazi gold passed through Vatican channels on its way to South America. Others dispute this. but the records are sealed. The full picture may never be known. So again, why the secrecy? Now let's shift gears. What can we learn from this? Whether you're religious or not, one thing is clear: the Vatican has mastered the long game. Its wealth strategy isn't based on short-term profit. It's based on permanence. Real assets, legacy positions, and systems that protect and regenerate wealth across generations. It's built not just on money, but on influence, relationships, and above all, narrative control. While most people chase cash flow, the Vatican quietly accumulates assets that never need to be liquidated. While others pay taxes on every dollar, it operates with legal immunity. While the public argues over budgets and bailouts, the Vatican preserves one of the most powerful balance sheets in history, largely outside public view. So what's the takeaway? In a world obsessed with fast money, maybe the real game is slow, strategic, and hidden in plain sight. What would your finances look like if you stopped chasing income and started building wealth that never needed to be cashed out? What would happen if more people thought in centuries instead of paychecks? And why are we never taught any of this in school? We're not here to criticize. We're here to observe, question, and learn. Because understanding how power structures actually operate is the first step to building your own. If the Vatican can become one of the wealthiest entities in the world by playing the long game, what's stopping you from doing the same? There's a difference between wealth and cash, between power and visibility, between what you own and what you control. This video isn't about religion. It's about reality. And in that reality, the ones who win are the ones who understand the systems, even the ones you're not supposed to ask about. Let's explore something even more unusual. In 2022, leaked reports revealed that the Vatican had quietly invested in a London property deal worth hundreds of millions, funded in part by donations given to Peter's Pence, a charitable fund intended for the poor. The deal ended in scandal and financial loss. But it raised a deeper question. How often does charitable money get rerouted into opaque financial strategies? If it can happen once, could it happen regularly, hidden under layers of institutional authority and complex ownership? We'll likely never know. And maybe that's the point, because while most institutions are bound by shareholders, oversight boards, or regulatory commissions, the Vatican answers only to itself. It is judge, jury, and accountant. This leads to one of the most psychologically gripping questions of all. What does it mean when a single entity holds both spiritual and financial power without external accountability? And is that model being replicated in other elite institutions today? Here's something else worth considering. The Vatican's true leverage doesn't just come from assets, it comes from time. Unlike corporations that think in quarters or governments bound by election cycles, the Vatican plays in centuries. That long view orientation allows it to make moves that pay off for decades, but eventually tilt the game board in its favor. This is how real dynasties are built, through patient positioning, asset protection, and absolute narrative control. And it's strange. If you're the kind of person who's ready to see through the noise and learn how real wealth works, consider subscribing. At Wealth Signal, we decode the hidden systems shaping the world and give you the tools to build your own, one smart move at a time.